Hi, everybody. Remember, we're doing this for Mark Wayner in merit of his neshama. And as Jewish law tells us, that when a group of people get together, it doesn't only bring energy to the soul in heaven, but it actually has the power to push away pandemics. Believe me, the world needs that power at the moment. And next Sunday, I'm going to post it on the chat. Next Sunday, we're doing a stop for 3 minutes and do a prayer for Mashiach. But you'll see, we made a video, I sent it out, send it again. I'm going to ask everybody here to please participate. We'll get a lot of stuff from you this week to participate, to come, and to get others to come as well. Not to come, you just stop whatever you're doing next Sunday. Now, what we're up to is in the second chapter of Pirkei Avos. The second chapter of Pirkei Avos. Let me just get it right here. Okay. Okay, good. Now, the second chapter of Pirkei Avos is an amazing, amazing chapter. This is such an exciting Mishnah. The Mishnah reads as follows. Rabbi says, who's Rabbi? Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was a direct descendant from Hillel. He lives after the destruction of the temple. He was the one who compiled the 60 volumes of the Mishnah. He lived in the year 3949, after the Romans, after everything. So Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, he says as follows. Rabbi says, what is the direct path for a person to go? Anything that is harmonious for himself and is harmonious for others. Now the Hebrew word that close the door, it means harmonious. So let's repeat those words. Rabbi says, which is the correct path for a person to choose? Which is the right path for a person to choose? Anything that is good for him, harmonious for him, and harmonious for others. Number one, who was Rabbi? Why doesn't it say Rabbi Yehuda Nossi? Like before, all the other sages, we've called him Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. All of a sudden, we just call him Rabbi. Now, Rabbi was the one. Rabbi is an acronym for Rosh B'nai Yisrael, a leader of the Jewish people. And very few people in history have just earned that title of Rabbi, where you just call the man Rabbi. Rosh B'nai Yisrael, he was a true leader of the Jewish people. Now, I have no doubt that I told you the story before, but the story is found in the Gemara in Ksubas. The story in Ksubas says the following story, and it's a fascinating story, that Rebbe, first of all, was very, very wealthy. What's the takeaway message from us? For us, not only was he very wealthy, but he lived life to its fullest. Even when radishes were out of season, he had them on his table. That beautiful takeaway lesson from that. As long as you're serving God right, as long as you're being good for yourself and good to others, you're being charitable, there's nothing wrong with having wealth. There's nothing wrong with spoiling yourselves. It's other religions that taught that you have to abstain from other things in order to be holy. That's not a Jewish way of thinking. Rebbe was very, very wealthy, but whatever came into Rebbe's domain, he used for the service of God. In other words, what does that mean? He had the best meat and best wine, both on Shabbos and during the week. You know why? Because if you eat healthy, if you eat good meat and you drink good wine, it helps broaden your mind, the Gemara says. So there's a takeaway from this. Don't be apologetic to yourself. Enjoy life as long as you're doing it for the right reason. As long as you're making a bracha before, the energy's helping you bring up a family, or you indulging on Shabbos and Yom Tov because it's God's day. God told you to have a party on that day. Okay, so that's what it says about Rebbe. Rebbe, on the last day of his life, he put up his finger to God. He said, I didn't use my finger, anything, even my little finger wasn't used except for the service of you. And this was a man who had everything. Now, before Rabbi Yehuda Nossi died, he called his family together. I think I've told you the story before. He said, I'm dying. I'm going to ask you, please, my table should be set in its regular way. The candelabra on my table should be like it always was, and my bed should be set. And the Gemara goes on to tell the story that every week after Rabbi Yehuda Nossi died, he would come back physically and make Kiddush for his family. Physically. In other words, although he was died, although he's buried in Tiberias, understand the way we look at death, what we understand of death. We go to a cemetery, we think it's a place where you bury people. It's a place of life, just certain things we can't see because we're a bit blinded. We're a little bit dead. But anyways, Rabbi Yehuda Nossi used to come every Friday night and make Kiddush for his family. It stopped because a neighbor came and the maidservant said, I'm sorry, you can't come from the other world. You can't come. Rebbe's visiting from the other world. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi said the secret's getting out, and he stopped coming. The Rebbe explains why did he want those three things prepared, the candelabra, the table, and the bed. It's telling you the relationship he wanted to have with his family afterwards. Why would you go see a father? You'll go cry on a father if you're battling a little bit with health. That's the candelabra. Table is sustenance. And children, if you're battling with your kids a bit, that's why you go see a father, that's why you go see a Rebbe. But Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was telling you that although I'm going to depart from your physical eyes, I'm actually here for you. And you can come to me afterwards as well. That's why in the teachings of Chabad, a person goes to see a Rebbe every so often at the grave. And the person who made us live with that was the Rebbe. After the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe died in 1950, he pushed people to go visit the grave often. And if anybody wrote a letter to the famous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe would say, I will take it to the grave of my father-in-law. Anyways, that's a little bit about Rebbe Yehuda Nossi, the very wealthy, famous, godly sage Rabbi Yehuda Nossi. And he was called Rebbe because he was the true leader of the Jewish people, as I'll discuss in a minute. Now he says like this, what's the proper path? What's the right path for a person to choose? Anything that is harmonious for him. Now you can translate this word as anything that's good for him, anything that's beautiful for him, or anything that's harmonious for him and other people. So what does that mean? I think the first thing it means that in life, you've got to have harmony. Because what's extreme to me, or what's extreme to you might be actually natural for me, as long as I've got harmony. There's some people we don't have harmony. We're all over the place. We become extreme. Rabbi Yehuda Nossi said, I don't like that. I don't want you to become extreme. You have to have balance. What does balance mean? It has to be good for you and good for everybody else around you. Let me give you a simple example. All of a sudden, a group of us go on holiday every year, and I've decided this year I'm becoming a vegetarian. I'm just using this as a stupid example. I mustn't go impose that on everybody else. Let it be good for you, but it must be good for people around you. Don't make things for people around you uncomfortable. You've got a new mishugas. You may keep the mishugas. Don't make it mad for people. Let's use money as an example. If I'm giving all my money away, it's good for the world, but bad for me. If I'm not giving any money away, it's good for me, but not good for anybody else. And Rebbe says you have to have that balance. Now let's focus in for a few minutes on bringing balance to our life. Because these words are very, very clever, by the way. Because sometimes, and if you look at any other religion, religions want you to become extreme. And that's why in the Catholic religion, a person had to become totally celibate. In other Eastern religions, they ran away from wealth. They excused wealth. The Torah says as follows. I want everybody to imagine, maybe this is a takeaway for us. Here's an exercise for us. Let's have a circle. And we got to be, this is the balance that we have to have. Now let me clarify. The Hebrew word that he uses here is balance or beauty. It has to be harmonious. What does harmonious mean? What does beauty mean? Joseph's coat that Jacob made wasn't one color. It was a mixture of colors. When it's something balanced and beautiful, and if you've seen beautiful pieces of art, they're able to take color in the most amazing manner, or a variety of colors, and bring the most beautiful, balanced thing. That's what the Torah wants you to be. It wants you to be a variety of different colors, a variety of different things, making the beautiful you, the you that you could become, the us that we could become. Let me clarify that word. Let me clarify. Sorry, I'm using my phone today and somebody came in. Now, let me clarify as follows. Let's think. I would say that if we're sitting down now and we're putting our teachings into practice, the first thing we have to do is we have to have, let's make a circle. Let's make a pie chart. The first thing we have to do is we have to have time to serve Hashem. We have to have time to pray. We have to have time to sit and contemplate and reflect and pray to God to help us and to help our family, to heal us and to heal our family. That's one thing. But I can't do that all day. It's one compartment. Then I have to have another compartment in my balanced life of me to me, my learning, my self-development, to have a learning program every single day. Now, I can't learn all day and night. I can't do that. I've got a family to bring up, etc., etc., etc. So I've got to have that. So the first part is me to Hashem, prayer, etc., etc. Reflection. I want you asking please to be quiet. Number two, the second thing I have to have is I have to have me for self-development, learning, etc. as well, even though that's also serving God. Then it's me to my parents, me to my family, me to all the people that are close to me. I have to have time for that as well. I can't be exclusively to them. That's not balanced. I have to have me to making a living, me to my hobbies, me to my friends, me to my acquaintances, me to changing the world for good. And slowly but surely, I have to put all those things together. That's what it means to be a truly balanced person. I'll tell you a story. You can't compare singing to studying Torah. The fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe was once talking, and he said a very long mystical discourse, long mystical discourse. It was in probably the year 1912. Anyways, his students were there, and they were battling to understand it. And after he finished this long mystical discourse, which was for over an hour, they were all came time for a song, because what would happen after the Rebbes would speak, there would be a song. Came time for the song, the Hasidic melody, and he looked around, he saw the boys not singing. So he said to one of the teachers, why aren't the boys singing? So he said, because they're trying to review what you just taught. So he just said something. He said something beautiful. He said, and I try to live with this. He said, where a person is, that's where he has to be. Now's a time for the song. That's a time for learning. Because that teaches you something in life, to be focused, but to be balanced. And that's why he's called Rebbe, because a Rebbe is perfectly balanced. For a Rebbe, believe me, all he wants to do is learn Torah the whole day and pray the whole day, be removed from the world. He doesn't want to have to do with this world, but he gets his life right. He lives in a physical world, he lives in a spiritual world, and he's bettering the world around him. That is what we have to do in our lives. We have to bring a balance to our lives where we have perfect balance. That's the first line of Rebbe. You've got to pick something that's harmonious for you, but harmonious for everybody around you. And you've got to go out of your way. You've got to go out of your way to continuously think, not to make it for comfortable and for people around you. And by the way, just in our journey in life, if we've taken upon ourselves something that's good for us, that we want to do, don't go impose that on your friends around you. You don't have to do that. If you're so enthusiastic about it, your enthusiasm will shine, and they'll become involved with it. But don't be dogmatic with it. Good. Then the second thing he says is, now, as you go through your journey in life, we have decided what's an important mitzvah and what's not an important mitzvah. We've decided that Yom Kippur is more important than Lashon Hara. We've decided that. We've decided what's a big mitzvah and what's a small mitzvah. And comes along and he says, don't do that. Because let me share with you a story. We're all born under an astrological sign. Okay? As a result of that astrological sign, it will generally form our character, our natural character, but also to a degree, a future is predicted by that. We're not allowed to ever go to a fortune teller, but nonetheless, there's truth in the concept. The Gemara tells a story that an astrologer came to the famous Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Akiva is Rabbi Huda, Rebbe's teacher, by the way. An astrologer came to Rabbi Akiva and said, Rabbi Akiva, we pick up in the stars that your child, your daughter, we pick up in the stars that there's going to be a tragedy going to take place to her. On her wedding day, she is going to be bitten by a poisonous snake and die. Can you imagine Rabbi Akiva lived with us all his life? Anyways, but you can't be swayed by what an astrologer says. So nonetheless, comes the wedding day, he marries off his daughter, and comes the wedding day of the great Rabbi Akiva. He hugs his daughter, Mazel Tov, not knowing what's going to happen. The next morning, she comes to him, she says, Teddy, you cannot believe what happened to me. After the wedding reception yesterday, I went to my bridal chamber, I took off my brooch, and I put the brooch down, and I pierced the eye of a poisonous snake. I killed the snake. Rabbi Akiva broke down and told her the following story. That many years before, an astrologer told him that she was supposed to be bitten by a poisonous snake on her marriage day and die. He then said to her, my daughter, tell me what you did on your wedding day to save you from predestined death. So she thought, and then she went through the day and she says, you know what happened? At the wedding feast, everybody was so busy in your daughter's wedding, a beggar walked in, he was hungry, nobody was looking after him, and I took my meal and I gave it to him. Rabbi Akiva then made a statement that Jews live with to this very day. Tzedakah matzil mimoves mamish. Charity, and you can extend it to any mitzvah, can save you from predestined death. Now, why I say that is because you don't know what a little mitzvah is. We've decided. The truth of the matter is, How do I know what mitzvah it is for me to fulfill? The mitzvah that comes in front of me today. There was a man who was, I don't know if the story is true, but they tell the story. A man was thrown into prison 1,000 years ago, and the king allowed him to have 1 day off. I think it's at the Maram's time, if I remember correctly. The king allowed him to have 1 day off. So he wrote to a famous rabbi. He said, Rabbi, tell me which day should I take off? Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And the king said, the rabbi said to him, take off that day, the very next day, because that's the most important day. And the same thing with a mitzvah. You can't decide. It could be the mitzvah I'm doing now. Listen to what the Rambam says. The Rambam says that one mitzvah done by one individual will tip the scale that Mashiach will come. You can tip your entire destiny with one mitzvah. You can rise beyond the stars. You can bring down a level of godliness that transcends the stars just by one mitzvah. And therefore, don't overlook a mitzvah. The mitzvah that comes your way, you do immediately. You don't know the reward of the mitzvah. You don't know what's in front of you. It's the most powerful, powerful thing. Just do the mitzvah. Do the mitzvah that comes your way. You don't know what you're accomplishing. And therefore react, by the way. Don't be lazy with the mitzvah. Just go out and do it. Come, do whatever you can. Most of us in life, we just don't realize what we're accomplishing. And it could be, by the way, that you were put in such and such a place to do such and such a mitzvah that can bring total bracha to that place. I wanted to tell you a story, but I forgot it. It'll come back to me. Okay. Now, then he says like this. Now, in life, we're all programmed with a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Tov. We have two people within us. Once you understand it, we're a bit tzaka, we're a bit sugar. We have a godly soul and an animal soul, and they're always fighting. The godly soul sits in the brain and the right ventricle in the heart. The animal soul sits in the left ventricle of the heart. These two souls are always fighting. And that's why, by the way, how do you know when you're spiritual with this internal fight? When you're doing more good, that's when your evil is going to fight back. That's why, by the way, people who davening say, hey, well, I'm always plagued with negative thought and depressive thought and lustful thought. Why? Because your Yetzer Hara is fighting back. It's an indication that you're davening more. I don't know if I shared it with this year, but it's worth reporting. It's worth repeating. There's a law in Jewish law that if you say Shema is you're supposed to meditate on the oneness of God, that God is everything, everything is God. So when I say Shema in the morning, I'm supposed to Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and I'm supposed to think that God is everything, everything is God. When I think that, my whole life changes because God is with me. Now, what happens if I didn't think it through properly? I'm not allowed to repeat it. I'm not allowed to say Shema Yisrael and repeat it, because it could be that it's an affirmation that I believe in more than one deity. But what happens if I really am trying to say Shema, and every single time I'm plagued with an evil thought? That's why I'm repeating the Shema. So the Baal Shem Tov explained as follows, and please understand the power of this thinking. Nothing is random. We think things are random. Every single person you meet in life is by divine providence. Every thought that goes up into you is by absolute divine providence. That evil thought went up into your mind for you to push it away. Therefore, at that moment, you have to have that fight. When are you serving God? When you're fighting. When you're not fighting, in the old age home, retiring, you've got to fight every day. It has to be a fight. It has to be a struggle. And some of us, our whole life is there to struggle, but at least I'm growing. How do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? What Hashem wants me to do. And if now it's Yom Kippur day, and I'm in the shul davening, and I know all the meditations, and I'm fasting, and all the rest of it, and there's a woman who's just given birth, the year's 1815, and it's not as advanced as it is now, and there's a lady who's just given birth, and nobody's there to chop wood and make a fire and make her soup, that becomes the most godly thing to do. Don't you decide what's important or not. And when it comes to our journey in life, somehow the Yetzer Hara plays with us a little bit. He says like this: always look at the benefit, always look at the reward. Always look at the loss in performing a mitzvah compared to its eternal reward. A mitzvah, they always say, and I've said it in the show before, a friend in need is a pain in the neck because he's always asking you to do something. Okay? When you go out of your way to do something, right, there's a loss. It's a pain. I had to do this. Cost me time. But the eternal reward for that, in particular when it comes to helping somebody else, the Baal Shem Tov said that a soul can descend for 70 or 80 years with its primary aim just to do a favor for another. When I started the Mishnah, when I started teaching today, I mentioned to you that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi would come back after death to his family physically and make Kiddush. That's in the Gemara. Let me tell you a story about the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. The third Lubavitcher Rebbe would often have nocturnal visits from his grandfather, the author of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. They were very close, and after the Alter Rebbe passed away, he would come and reveal secrets to him. It was a time that he hadn't come for a while. The Tzemach Tzedek was going to shul in Lubavitch. It was market day, and market day things were lebedik. Anyways, a guy walked over to him while the Tzemach Tzedek was walking to shul. It was a very small shtetl, and he said, "Please, can I borrow a few kopecks? It's market day today. Please, can I borrow a few kopecks?" He said, "With pleasure. I'm going to daven. Straight after davening, come and see me. I'll give it to you." Now, for a Rebbe to put on tefillin, it's not like us knocking it off. There's a whole procedure to putting on talis and tefillin and meditations. He puts on talis and tefillin, and he remembers, oh, it's market day. It's market day. That boy, that guy needs the money early. He took off his talis and took off his tefillin, and believe me, for him to do that is a whole story. And he runs and he finds the guy and he gives him the money, a small amount of money. Help him for market day. When he comes back, that night he had the dream, and the Alter Rebbe came to him and appeared to him and said, "I'm coming to you in merit of the inconvenience that you caused yourself by giving the tzedakah." Now that is unbelievable to understand. There's always a loss in doing a mitzvah. There's a financial loss. There's an aggravation loss. No good deed goes without being punished. But at the same time, the reward, and not even about a personal reward. We're not talking about what you're accomplishing in heaven by a small thing can be infinite. And on the other hand, we all run to do a stupid sin, but the ramifications of that sin, the temporary gain of the sin, gets so lost in the loss that it occurs. And I leave everybody's mind. You can muck up your entire life in 3 minutes, right? You can do a stupid thing in 3 minutes, can mess up your life. And every sin has a bit of enjoyment. Every sin has a bit of enjoyment while you do it. You eat the treif and then you feel rotten afterwards. Have you ever felt rotten? You know something's wrong, right? You know something's wrong and you go and do it. You feel rotten. You hate yourself for doing it. Whatever that sin is. You break a discipline. You feel rotten. And by the way, even if you're in a diet and you break it, you feel bad afterwards. That's why the Gemara says, wicked people are always regretting. They're regretting their life. They're regretting this. The best, you want happiness, just do what you're supposed to do. That is the definition of happiness. Do what you're supposed to do and don't do what you shouldn't do. Because the 1 minute of joy that you had, it's all messed up. You should never have done it. The little bit of gossip that you spoke, you hate your life afterwards. But these are such unbelievable takeaways for a happy life. And then he says, Histakel b'shlosha dvarim, look into 3 things, v'ein ata bo lidei aveira, and you won't come to sin. So he's told you the most amazing things in this Mishnah. We could have spent an hour on each Mishnah. The first thing he told you, got to have balance which is good for you and good for everybody else. Also, do not be extreme. Do not be extreme. You have to have time for everything in your day. That's the challenge of a frum person. I can't just be davening all day. I can't just be learning all day. I can't just be working all day. And it's very hard, by the way, because some of us by nature just like to do one thing at a time. He says you have to have balance within your day. The perfect daughter is not necessarily the perfect spouse. There has to be a balance. The person is extreme in this, is not good at that. The Torah wants, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi wants you to have balance in your life. There's a time for everything. There's a time for eating with your family. Everything. But I'm not davening. You've got to get balance in your life. Okay? The famous Lubavitcher Rebbe went home every single day to have tea with his wife. And believe me, he had a busy schedule. He never took a holiday, by the way. Now, he says like this, look into 3 things and you won't come to sin. As an introductory, he says, what is it? Know what's above you. And then what are the 3 things? So know what's above you. The ayin roy, the eye sees, the ozen shemas, the ear hears. And everything is being recorded. Now, let's just focus in on that, what that means. Just focusing on that, for those of you who have the text, know what's above you. The eye sees, the ear hears, and everything is written. What does it mean, know what's above you? There's 2 ways of reading that word. There's 2 ways of reading that phrase. The simple way of reading it is, know what's above you. Above you, there's an eye that sees, there's an ear that hears, and everything's written. But there's another way of reading it. Da no, mila mimoch. No, what's happening above is from you. What does that mean? When you focus in on that and understand that beyond this physical world are a whole bunch of spiritual worlds. And as you get higher and higher, you feel and see more godly energy. You can't believe how exciting it is up there. Unbelievable. Da no mila. What's happening above is from you. Did you know that when a kid does a mitzvah, a parent in heaven gets a tremendous amount of energy? When a kid puts together a shir for a parent in heaven, you have no idea what you're causing up and high. And not just for your parents, but all the cosmos above are all being affected by what we do now. We are not slime. We're not bacteria. We're a godly soul that doesn't just affect this world, but affects all the spiritual worlds beyond that. That's the way we're going to read the Mishnah. Da no, mila. What's happening above is mimoch, is from you down below here. Every single thing you do in this world has a spiritual ramification up on high. Even the way you walk over a cut toenail has an effect up on high. But we will finish the Mishnah next week, because a teacher has to know he's never allowed to speak over time. Have a great week. We'll finish it next week.